I made a deal with the devil and kept my soul, but my deal might not be over like I thought. This is my story. I was once a dutiful soldier, in a perpetual war that seemed never ending. I was always at the front line, taking big risks and never getting injured, gaining the nickname, the Iron Man. But one day everything changed. A peace treaty was struck. Unfortunately, it came at a great cost. New political powers rose from the treaty. Soon our country was being run by figureheads who we once fought against. It seems they won the war, but with pen and paper. There was so much corruption in this new government, and the people had no more fight left in them to try to stop it. There was no money for veterans, no jobs for the lower classes, and no social assistance as the politicians were pocketing the country's money. I, along with the majority of the country, was having trouble finding work. I had no home and rarely had food. One day, I came upon an apple tree that stood at a crossroads. Being hungry, I went up to the tree and plucked an apple down from it. I sat down to enjoy this brief moment, hoping the apple would give me some strength to carry on to the next day. As I took my first bite, I noticed a dark shadow traveling along the ground, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I slowly lifted my head to see an eccentric-looking man standing before me. The strange man wore a green jacket and leaned on a golden walking stick adorned with sapphires. The man looked quite dignified, but then I realized. He had goat hooves for feet. I jumped up out of fright, dropping the apple as I stared down at the goat hooves. I went to grab my rifle from my back when the strange man started to speak. "I know what you are in need of," said the man. I stood there frozen for a moment. Out of curiosity more than anything, I stopped to listen to what this strange man had to say. The man in the green jacket leaned forward on his walking stick and smirked as he continued to speak. "I will give you money and property, as much as you can squander away in your lifetime." I shook my head as I tried to make sense of this situation, stammering in response, "Who? What? What are you talking about?" The man in the green jacket ignored my questions and continued. However, he paused for a moment to add some sort of flair for the dramatic, waiting to see if I flinched at his words. "Before I give you everything your heart desires, I must know if you are fearless. I don't want to be giving away my money to a coward." The strange man questioning my bravery got my attention right quick, and I snapped back at him. "A soldier and fear, how can those go together? I can handle any test of bravery." The man grinned wide and answered, "Very well, look behind you." I turned around and suddenly a large growling bear with red eyes appeared, barreling towards me. I shouted for a moment out of surprise, confused where this bear came from. But quickly my training kicked in and I grabbed my rifle and aimed. The man must have seen the smile on my face as I took aim and shot the bear in the snout. It fell down motionless. The strange man grinned ear to ear and said, "Very good. You do not lack courage, but there is one more condition that you will have to fulfill." I was beginning to put together who this man was. The goat feet, the sudden appearance of a bear right on cue, and now he wants to make a deal? I realized I must be talking to a demon or the devil himself, so I quickly interrupted to make a counter-offer. Standing tall, I spoke with conviction, "As long as I can keep my soul and salvation, then I will consider your offer. Otherwise I'll have nothing to do with it." The devil's face became emotionless as he leaned in closer, inspecting me up and down, taking a long whiff of me, as if I was some meal. He spun around and began to pace slowly, playfully whirling his walking stick around. The man came across as some kind of demonic circus ringleader with the way he moved and spoke. His face went from emotionless to uncanny as he smirked and began to speak. "A counter-offer? How intriguing." The devil grinned and stared me in the eyes, as if trying to dig a hole into my soul. This clearly was a fun game for him and he was playing with me like a cat plays with its prey. He continued, "How about this then? For the next 7 years you are neither to wash yourself, nor comb your hair, nor cut your nails, nor pray. I will give you a jacket and a cloak, which you must wear. If you die during these 7 years, you are mine. If you stay alive, you are free, and I will bestow all the riches upon you to last a lifetime." I pondered for a moment, thinking about how desperate I had been the past few months, and I thought about how many times I had faced death in the war and survived. I was the Iron Man after all. I decided the odds would be in my favor. I nodded at him and said, "All right, you have a deal." The devil held out his hand. I leaned in, pausing for a moment, wondering if this was a mistake. But quickly he grasped my hand, and that was that. The deal was done. The devil took off his green jacket and gave it to me, saying, "Whenever you wear this jacket and reach into its pocket, you will find a handful of money." Then he walked over to the dead bear and with a burning hand ripped off its pelt, transforming it into a cloak. He wrapped it around my shoulders and said, "This shall be your cloak, and your bed as well. You are to sleep on it, and you are not allowed to lie in any other bed." The devil grabbed my jacket and put it on himself as if it was some sort of symbol of the deal. He smiled at me, and with a malicious tone he told me another condition. "One last thing, your name for these next 7 years will be Bearskin. That is the name you will go by, no exceptions." I furrowed my brow and began to walk up to him in protest. "Wait a minute, you keep adding things to this deal." But my protest was without merit, as the devil smirked, turned and disappeared right before my eyes. I sighed and mumbled under my breath, "Bearskin? What a stupid name." I then shoved my hands into the pockets of the green jacket and found that the promise was true. I felt piles of paper inside and pulled out a handful of them to see dozens of $100 bills. I gasped for a moment. Part of me thought this whole exchange was some kind of hunger-induced delusion. But no, I really did just enter a deal with the devil for my soul. What did I do? I cried out to myself. But it was too late. The deal was struck. I decided that I had to play the devil at his game. I would keep my soul pure and not let money taint it. I began to travel so I could do good in the world. I didn't buy any material things for myself, only basic food and shelter, and I gave money to others in need. I didn't want to get comfortable at any one location, so I stayed at hostels, shelters, or cheap motels. I figured if I did good deeds, my soul would stay clean, and if I kept on the move I would have a better chance of surviving. The first 2 years, my appearance went from okay to somewhat acceptable. By year 3, I smelled like a rotting corpse and I looked like some kind of cryptid bear person. I was covered in dirt, hair was overgrown and matted, and my nails were long and curling. I was a mess, and it was getting harder to be accepted around the general populace. Everyone who saw me ran away. But because I gave back to others, I was always able to get by and find some lodging and food. This was a 7-year war that I was determined to win. In the 4th year, I arrived at a growing town in the east. The only option for lodging was a motel that was being renovated. Half the rooms were still run down and unsafe. The owner would not let me rent a room though. He told me it was because I would scare away patrons. So I reached into both pockets and pulled out piles of money for him, throwing it on the counter. The owner's eyes grew wide and he agreed to let me stay, but only in one of the dilapidated rooms. I also had to promise not to let myself be seen, saying he would evict me if I scared away patrons. One evening as I sat on the dingy bed, I began daydreaming about my future when I heard a loud sobbing in a nearby room. I had to stick to the plan. I had to help those in need. I decided to risk being seen and I knocked on their door. An old man answered, his cheeks tear-stained and the sound of his sobs still lingered. As he saw me, he jumped out of fear and was about to run away when I spoke. It seemed that a human voice coming from my tussle of hair and dirt made the old man curious, so he stopped to listen. I asked the old man, "What is wrong? Why all the tears?" The old man went on to explain his story. He recently lost all his money in a business deal. He even lost his house. The motel was the only place he could afford to keep a roof over the heads of his daughters and himself, and they barely had one meal a day to split between them. The motel being upgraded meant the new owner wanted them out as they couldn't afford the upgraded rooms. The new owner threatened to call the police to have them arrested if they did not pay up or leave. I smiled at the old man and put my hand into the green jacket pocket. "If that is your only problem, I have money," I said as I handed him handfuls of bills. "Take it, get back on your feet and help your family." The old man's eyes began to swell up as he softly cried tears of happiness. He smiled up at me and said, "Thank you for your generosity. Please come to dinner tonight with my family so I can repay your kindness with all I have to offer, my time and appreciation." I smiled and nodded to the old man, accepting his invitation. When dinner time approached, I knocked on his door. The old man answered, inviting me inside while saying, "I told my daughters what you have done to help us. They are all so thankful and looking forward to meeting you." I followed the old man into the little kitchenette. Just as he was about to introduce me to his daughters, one of them screamed out of fright and ran out of the room. For a moment, I forgot what I looked like. That scream reminded me again that people see me as a monster. I hung my head down and told the old man, "I frighten people when I don't mean to. I will head back to my room." I started to turn around to leave when another one of his daughters called out to me, "Wait, please don't go. What you did for us, and we are strangers to you. Clearly you are not a monster and we want to repay your kindness. Please have a seat, we want you to stay." She stood there smiling kindly, her eyes held a pure sincerity in them. Her words and demeanor relaxed me and I took a seat at the table with the old man and the two remaining daughters. The kind-hearted daughter smiled as she passed me some food. "My name is Adriana," she said. I mumbled back, "My name is Bearskin." The other daughter at the table began to chuckle. She had been staring at me with a look of confusion. She scoffed and began her barrage of questions. Who would name their child that? How do you even have money? Why don't you get yourself cleaned up? You look like an animal. The old man shot his daughter a look of disapproval as he shushed her. "Quiet you." The old man looked back at me and said, "I'm sorry, she can be incredibly blunt and doesn't know how to be tactful with her words." His daughter folded her arms across her chest and began to pout, "Daddy, I'm just an honest person. I don't see the point in lying." I looked over at her and nodded my head in response. Honesty can be very hard to come by. There are so many corrupt people in the world. It's nice to meet someone who has the ability to tell it like it is. She smiled at my response. We continued idle conversation as we finished the rest of the evening's meal. Their family won my heart that night and I ended up spending the next year in that town. During that year I helped them get situated into a home, get the father's business back, and pretty much became a part of the family. I had become especially close with Adriana. She was a very kind soul and was determined to repay my kindness with her company. As we spent more time together, I found myself starting to have romantic feelings for her. After 5 years of living with this deal, I decided to just be spontaneous. We were having a picnic at a nearby pond, enjoying the scenery when I just blurted it out. "Adriana, would you consider marrying me?" I know it was a huge leap to ask her to marry me when I looked like this, but after the way my life had gone over the last 5 years, I figured I would just take a shot at happiness. I have been dealing with rejection and disgust this whole time, so I could easily handle it if she said no. Adriana sat up and moved her hands to grab mine. Even though they were in a disgusting state, she didn't seem to care. She smiled up at me and surprisingly responded, "Yes, that would be lovely. There is so much bad in this world. I know you are a good man and you truly care about my family." I smiled and pulled an old ring off one of my fingers, snapping it in half. As I tried to explain my one caveat, I still have to complete this journey I am on. It is difficult for me to explain why, but I must leave for a bit to finish this. She looked up at me concerned. "How long will you be gone?" I shook my head and told her, "I have 2 more years left. If you are okay with waiting, I want you to keep half of this ring and I'll keep the other half. When I get back, I will get you a proper ring." She began to cry softly. I wrapped my arms around her and told her, "I must go help more people. I have a situation hanging over my head and I don't want you or your family to get hurt. I promise, I will tell you everything if I return. If I do not return after 2 years, then it is because I have died." She nodded, continuing to cry, but took the half-piece of ring. I traveled the country for the next 2 years, doing good wherever I could. Finally, the last day of my 7 years came around. So at dawn I went back to the apple tree at the crossroad and waited for the devil to show up. Fairly quickly the wind began to howl and the shadow fell across the road again. I looked up to see the devil scowling angrily at me. He threw my old jacket at me and demanded the return of his green jacket. I stood tall, proud of surviving the last 7 years and doing good all along the way. I held up a finger up to the devil as I made my demands. "Now hold on, we haven't finalized our deal yet. You added more to the deal without giving me a chance to counter last time, so my final demand is, you have to clean me up. Take the last 7 years of filth and growth and make me look as I was." The devil scowled and raised his hand up, snapping his fingers, and suddenly I was back to looking like myself again. My skin was clean, hair and nails trimmed, and clothing was fresh. I looked even better than I had before. Now, you owe me my riches, I announced to the devil. The devil grit his teeth at me and reluctantly snapped his fingers as he said, "There. Now your jacket will always provide you with the same wealth as my green jacket did before." He then snatched up the green jacket and in an instant, he disappeared. Seeing the demon gone, I smiled and let out a breath of relief. Finally, my life is my own again, I said to myself as I walked away from the crossroads for the last time. I quickly traveled back to the town where Adriana was, hoping with all hope that she would still be there waiting for me. When I knocked on the door, I looked so different from before that no one recognized me. The old man thought I was a businessman and invited me inside. I sat down with the family, and the two other daughters began to fawn over me. They started pouring me wine, serving me food and doing everything to try and vie for my attention. Adriana, however, would not raise her eyes to look at me and did not speak a word. She was dressed all in black, and that's when I realized she thought I was dead. The father began conversation, assuming I was there to discuss a business opportunity. But I interrupted him and told him, "Oh no, I am here to get my bride so we can get married." When the two other sisters heard this, they jumped up and ran into their bedrooms to put on some fancy dresses. Apparently each of them thought that I was here to arrange a marriage and that they may be chosen as a bride. Their father went to the kitchen to grab more wine to celebrate. As soon as I was alone with Adriana, I brought out my half of the ring and dropped it into a glass of wine, which I handed to her. She took the wine and began to sip on it. Seeing the half ring in her glass, her face changed and she began to smile. She took her half, which she wore on a ribbon around her neck, put them together, and saw that the two pieces matched perfectly. I smiled and said, "It's nice to finally meet you, Adriana. My name is Jacob. The journey is finally over." She smiled wide and stood up, embracing me, and we kissed. In the meantime, the two sisters came back, beautifully dressed, their hair and makeup done just right. When they saw Adriana and I kissing, they began to fume and cry. The brutally honest sister's eyes seemed to flash red and she walked out of the room for a moment. Her walk seemed off, like a marionette being controlled by strings. I felt the air in the room shift, something was wrong. I looked around the room, trying to figure out what was going on when suddenly Adriana's sister came running back in, screaming with a knife in her hand. I couldn't stop her in time, and she began attacking Adriana with quick movements, over and over. A scuffle ensued and I pulled her off Adriana, throwing her against a wall, knocking her unconscious. But it was too late. I scooped up Adriana, she had lost so much blood, it was everywhere. So much damage in only a few seconds. I yelled at the other sister to call for help. She got so scared she ran out of the house. The father came running into the room after hearing all the screaming. Upon seeing the bloody mess and his daughter laying there lifeless, he began to clutch at his chest as he too fell to the ground. I felt like I was in some weird fever dream, surrounded by death. I ran to the phone to call for help. As I was speaking with emergency services, I heard Adriana's sister wake up and start screaming. What did I do? I ran back into the room to try and subdue her until the police showed up, but she saw me, panicked and ran out the front door. I ran after her but couldn't catch up. I had to watch as she frantically ran into the road and straight into traffic, when suddenly a large truck appeared out of nowhere slamming into her. I stood outside for a moment in complete shock of everything that I just witnessed. Then suddenly I felt a cool chill, the hair raising on the back of my neck as I watched a shadow crawl along the ground. The familiar shadow as I had seen 2 times before. I turned around to go back into the house, but there he was, leaning on his walking stick, grinning at me. The green jacket and goat feet, mocking me. I became red with anger and began to yell at him, "What did you do?" The devil leaned in close, growling out to me, "Can't you see? I now have 3 souls instead of just your one." He then disappeared in the blink of an eye. I lost the love of my life that day and remained forever scarred. 3 people died and their souls damned, all because I made a selfish deal. I never forgot their faces. 10 years have passed, and yet I recognized her like it was yesterday. The sister who ran away, I saw her standing outside my apartment last night. And she was wearing a green jacket. That familiar jacket. I thought I escaped with just heartbreak, but it would seem there is no true escape from the devil. I'm not sure what kind of deal she made. This is why I am currently recording my story. I don't know what will come of me tomorrow, This might be my end.